Day 578, Wednesday, January 22nd. Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25, 1-38, NKJV. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah, king of Judah, which was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, which Jeremiah the prophet spoke to all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, From the 13th year of Josiah the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even to this day, this is the 23rd year in which the word of the Lord has come to me. And I have spoken to you, rising early and speaking, but you have not listened. And the Lord has sent to you all his servants the prophets, rising early and sending them, but you have not listened or inclined your ear to hear. They said, Repent now every one of his evil way and his evil doings, and dwell in the land that the Lord has given to you and your fathers forever and ever. Do not go after other gods to serve them and worship them, and do not provoke me to anger with the works of your hands, and I will not harm you. Yet you have not listened to me, says the Lord, that you might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands to your own hurt. Therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, because you have not heard my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, says the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon my servant, and will bring them against this land, against its inhabitants, and against these nations all around, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, a hissing and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the lamp. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will come to pass when 70 years are completed, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquities, says the Lord, and I will make it a perpetual desolation. So I will bring on that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied concerning all the nations. For many nations and great kings shall be served by them also, and I will repay them according to their deeds and according to the works of their own hands. For thus says the Lord God of Israel to me, Take this wine cup of fury from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it, and they will drink and stagger and go mad because of the sword that I will send among them. Then I took the cup from the Lord's hand, and made all the nations drink, to whom the Lord had sent me, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, its kings and its princes, to make them a desolation, an astonishment, a hissing and a curse, as it is this day, Pharaoh king of Egypt, his servants, his princes, and all his people, all the mixed multitude, all the kings of the land of Uz, all the kings of the land of the Philistines, namely Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, and the remnant of Ashdod, Edom, Moab, and the people of Ammon, all the kings of Tyre, all the kings of Sidon, and the kings of the coastlands which are across the sea, Dedan, Tema, Buz, and all who are in the farthest corners, all the kings of Arabia, and all the kings of the mixed multitude who dwell in the desert, all the kings of Zimri, all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of the Medes, all the kings of the north, far and near, one with another, and all the kingdoms of the world which are on the face of the earth. Also the king of Sheshach shall drink after them. Therefore you shall say to them, Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Drink, be drunk, and vomit. Fall and rise no more, because of the sword which I will send among you. And it shall be, if they refuse to take the cup from your hand to drink, then you shall say to them, Thus says the Lord of hosts, You shall certainly drink. For behold, I begin to bring calamity on the city which is called by my name, and should you be utterly unpunished? You shall not be unpunished, for I will call for a sword on all the inhabitants of the earth, says the Lord of hosts. Therefore prophesy against them all these words, and say to them, The Lord will roar from on high and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He will roar mightily against his fold. He will give a shout, as those who tread the grapes, against all the inhabitants of the earth. A noise will come to the ends of the earth, for the Lord has a controversy with the nations. He will plead his case with all flesh. He will give those who are wicked to the sword, says the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, Behold, disaster shall go forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind shall be raised up from the farthest parts of the earth. And at that day the slain of the Lord shall be from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. They shall not be lamented or gathered or buried, they shall become refuse on the ground. Wail, shepherds, and cry, roll about in the ashes, you leaders of the flock. For the days of your slaughter and your dispersions are fulfilled, you shall fall like a precious vessel. And the shepherds will have no way to flee, nor the leaders of the flock to escape. A voice of the cry of the shepherds, and a wailing of the leaders to the flock will be heard. For the Lord has plundered their pasture, and the peaceful dwellings are cut down because of the fierce anger of the Lord. He has left his lair like the lion, for their land is desolate because of the fierceness of the oppressor, and because of his fierce anger. Daily Deep Dive. The UCG reading plan states, This chapter of Jeremiah was written either just before or just after Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah, following the Battle of Carchemish, and made Jehoiakim swear allegiance to him. Since mention is made of the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, it seems most likely to refer to the period following his accession to the throne of Babylon in September of 605 BC, which occurred just after the invasion of Judah. If so, then Nebuchadnezzar basically came and went. It does not appear that he wrought any real damage on Judah at this time. Most likely, with Egypt in retreat, Jehoiakim switched allegiances rather quickly, giving up the temple treasures and prisoners mentioned in Daniel 1 without any resistance. Yet Jeremiah views what has transpired as a turning point, the beginning of the fulfillment of what he has proclaimed at God's behest for 23 years in conjunction with other prophets, since the beginning of his ministry. See Jeremiah 25:3. At that earlier time he had proclaimed that destruction would come on Judah from the north, all the families of the north, Jeremiah. Now he makes it clear that this refers to the Babylonian forces under Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah 25:8-9. Verses 11-14 relating to the 70 years have been a source of confusion to many. It seems to say that Babylon would fall in 70 years, and that this would be the same period as Judah's desolation. Jeremiah later writes to captives, telling them that God would cause them to return to the Promised Land after 70 years are completed at Babylon, Jeremiah 9:10. According to 2 Chronicles 36:20-23, the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC began the 70 years of desolation in fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy. Daniel and Zechariah apparently understood it this way too. Daniel 9:2, Zechariah 1:12. So where is the difficulty? Jeremiah gave his prophecy around the time that the initial deportation of Jews such as Daniel occurred, in 605 BC. But ancient Babylon fell to Cyrus of Persia in 539 BC, just 66 years later. And in that first year of Cyrus, he issues a decree allowing the Jews to return to the Promised Land. Again in fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy, Ezra 1:1, nothing significant appears to have happened in 535 BC, 70 years after Jeremiah gave this prophecy. Furthermore, it seems strange that punishment was supposedly to come on Babylon in 535 BC. When the Babylonian Empire ended 4 years earlier, in 539 BC. How then do we resolve this? We must realize that Jeremiah was foretelling two distinct things, each lasting 70 years but not necessarily the same 70 years. They are linked together because the accomplishment of the one is necessary for the fulfillment of the other. Jeremiah 2 mentions, 1. The desolation of Judah and the duration of the Babylonian Empire. Verses 8-10 describe the first element. Verse 11 is the transitional verse, which includes both elements. And verses 12-14 amplify the second element, explaining that Babylon will be destroyed at the end of its imperial reign. How long did the Babylonian Empire last? While the last pockets of Assyrian resistance were eliminated in the 605 BC Battle of Carchemish, the Assyrian Empire really came to an end with the fall of Haran to Babylonian-led forces in 609 BC. This was the defeat of the army that had fled Nineveh at its fall 3 years earlier in 612 BC. Starting in 609 BC, Babylon turned from battling the Assyrians themselves to subduing all the former Assyrian territories, beginning with the land of Armenia. Thus, the Babylonian Empire began in 609 BC. It then lasted 70 years, until the conquest of Cyrus in 539 BC, so this 70-year period had already begun when Jeremiah prophesied. Notice that he didn't say otherwise. The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, including the Temple of God, and took the bulk of the population captive in 586 BC. This accomplished its desolation which Jeremiah foretold. As mentioned, the fall of Babylon to Cyrus in 539 BC enabled the return of the Jews to the Promised Land. But the repopulation of the land took place over time. It is significant to note that 70 years from 586 BC brings us to 516 BC, the time the temple reconstruction begun under Zerubbabel was completed. The mirth and gladness of verse 10, repeated from Jeremiah 7:34 and Jeremiah 16:9, found greatest expression during the annual festivals, which were observed in the presence of the temple. Thus, the restoration of the temple brought an end to the 70-year desolation Jeremiah prophesied. See also Jeremiah 33, where the return of the voice of joy and gladness and of bride and bridegroom is associated with bringing the sacrifice of praise into the house of the Lord. Judgment on the nations moving on in chapter 25. Notice the reference in verse 13 to prophecies against the nations recorded in the book of Jeremiah. It may simply refer to what follows beginning in verse, but it could also refer to chapters. Jamieson, Fawcett Amp, Brown's commentary notes regarding Jeremiah It follows from this that the prophecies against foreign nations must have been already written. Hence, LXX, the Greek Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, inserts here those prophecies, but if they had followed immediately verses 13, there would have been no propriety in the observation in the verse. The very wording of the reference shows that they existed in some other part of the book, and not in the immediate context. It was in this very year, the 4th year of Jehoiakim Jeremiah, that Jeremiah was directed to write in a regular book for the first time all that he had prophesied against Judah and foreign nations from the beginning of his ministry. Probably at a subsequent time when he completed the whole work including CHS, Jeremiah himself inserted the clause, "All that is written in this book, which Jeremiah hath prophesied against all the nations." The prophecies in question may have been repeated, as others in Jeremiah, more than once, so in the original smaller collection they may have stood in an earlier position, and in the fuller subsequent collection, in their later and present position. Starting in Jeremiah 5:15 and continuing to the end of the chapter, God pronounces judgment on the nations. Notice that he begins with Jerusalem and Judah, put first, for judgment begins at the house of God, they being most guilty whose religious privileges are greatest. 1 Peter 4:17 compare Ezekiel 9:6, JFB commentary, note on Jeremiah 5:18. Yet in fairness, judgment is brought on all nations, see especially verse 29. In verse 26, the name Sheshach refers to Babylon, see Jeremiah 1:41. Various explanations have been given for it. One is that it was written according to a code wherein the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is expressed by the last, etc., so that the word Sheshach would exactly correspond to Babel. However, it seems unnecessary to conceal the word Babel here since the word Babylon is given in close context in both places. Others translate the word as meaning bronze-gated or house of a prince, and there are still other explanations. See JFB note on 526, Alfred Jones, Sheshach, Jones's Dictionary of Old Testament Proper Names, 1997. Perhaps the most likely meaning is thy fine linen, the KJV Old Testament Hebrew Lexicon, strong number 8347, online at bible.crosswalk.com/lexicons/Hebrew. This would seem to tie in with the description of end-time Babylon in Revelation 18:16, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. The prophecy of judgment on the nations in Jeremiah 25 applied in part to what happened in ancient times. All of those mentioned in verses fell to Babylon. Then, as in verse, Babylon fell after them. But this scenario will be repeated in the last days. Indeed, it is clear from verses that a final fulfillment of this prophecy will come in the end time, when a large percentage of mankind will be destroyed during the day of the Lord. Compare Isaiah 6:16. And